This program is brought to you by the National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors, promoting political advocacy, education, and the ethical conduct of its members nationwide.
My name is Robin Mueller. Welcome to Part 2, Ethics, where we are going to talk a little bit about suitability. You might recall in Hour 1 we answered a couple why questions on why we were mandated to be here for 3 hours every 2 years. We also answered the question why the public leans negative when they hear the word insurance, and we spent a lot of time, while we solicited some stories, we spent a lot of time on defining what good ethics is. And you may recall that the foundation simply was threefold. While again we had a lot of talking points, it was simply abiding by laws, rules, and guidelines, full disclosure, and then while we keep our clients' best interests uppermost, certainly considering all parties. Hour 2 then moves into a discussion of suitability, and I think everyone in this room would agree that with compliance as it is today, that's a very, very important word. One only has to look at your own individual state's reports on complaints, and oftentimes you're going to see lack of suitability, both on the agent and on the company's part, and that's where the fines are coming in. So we're going to spend some time defining what suitability is, and I'm going to go through a 15-step process with you on suitability, which I believe will keep you safe. Then we're going to move it into what I call the imperfect storm. And we talked about this a little bit in Hour 1 in some opening remarks, but the demographic that gets taken advantage of the most is?
Elderly.
The elderly, the senior demographic, and of course the vulnerable adults as well. And when we get there, we'll develop that a little bit. We'll put a couple reasons on why seniors do get taken advantage of. And I'm going to give you 3 areas that you want to focus on. And while there are many, and in fact we could spend an hour alone on senior demographics, I won't. I'll give you at least 3 areas to focus on. And then finally we'll conclude this hour with some other talking points, talking about what a fiduciary is or isn't. We'll talk a little bit about that word professional. What does it mean to you? We'll talk a little bit about social responsibility, and I'll also give you some other ideas to develop this. Nice thing about this ethics class is it's fresh all the time, it changes all the time, because the audiences are different all the time, and everyone brings their own different experiences and things like that. So with that, let's get into suitability. I'm going to make a statement, either agree or disagree with it. Passion without suitability could be dangerous. Yes or no?
Oh, yes. Yes.
All right, and you heard that that's pretty resounding. Passion without suitability could be dangerous. So I spent a lot of time on suitability, and really the last 3.5 years of my career, I've been studying suitability, and you can define it with a lot of different words, but I'm going to give you one. Matching. Matching. What is suitability? We're matching. But what are we matching? And years ago, if someone would ask me what suitability was, I would say person to product. Product to person. The order doesn't matter. And then as you begin to study the subject more, it evolves. You really don't match the person to the product. You match the product to the need. To the person. And now you begin to evolve that even more. It's really not always product, is it? It's really the solution. Could be multiple products. So what are we matching? Solution to the need for that person. Now let me ask the audience, would you agree with me that people's needs change, yes or no?
Yes.
Of course they do. So what might be suitable today for you, Diane, might not be suitable for you in 5 years. So we then again evolve what the definition of suitability is. And I think you're safe with this definition. We know the one word is match. Some have used appropriate, and I'm fine with that. I like the word match. If in fact passion without suitability could be dangerous, then we have to match. But what do we have to match? Solution to need for the person at the time. And you'll be on solid ground with that. Solution to the need for the person at the time. Now, let's talk about this 15-step process. Now remember, the goal here is suitability. That's where we want to get, to suitability. And in fact, suitability in this process is step number 9. So there's 8 that go before it and 6 that follow it. So what's the very first thing that one should do when they're thinking about getting to the end result, which is suitability. And I'll try and lead you a little bit. I think everyone in this room would agree with me that there's a lot of ways to communicate with a client, yes?
Yes.
Okay. I've got 7. But if you can bring up other ways, that's fine. And let me just go through them with you. In person, by phone, through the mail, fax, text, email, social media. Are there any others I'm missing? Okay. I'll ask you, what's the absolute best way to communicate with a client?
In person.
Face to face, in person, absolutely. Why, Tara? Why is that better? What can you pick up when you're eyeball to eyeball, like we are right now, that you can't get by email? Let me ask it this way. This is for everyone. Can email be misinterpreted?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. All right? Now, you can get a little about what I'm looking for by phone, okay? But by the rest, think of it. Mail, fax, email, text, social media. You can't get any of this other stuff. And I'm not talking about FaceTime and Skype and all of that kind of stuff when you can see the person. When I talk social media, so in person and by phone, you can get some of it by phone. You can get all of it in person, face to face. All right? What is it?
Nonverbal.
Yes! Nonverbals. And some would say you pick up more from the nonverbal, like what I'm picking up from all of you. You really don't want to be here. You all got other stuff to do. Okay? I get it. All right? But think of it positively. Think about this. Didn't that first hour fly by quick?
Yes.
Yes, it's going to go by quick. The positive is we're less than an hour from lunch, and guess what? How cool is this? In 2 more hours, we're done with all of this. You pick up all the nonverbals. Absolutely. That's huge. Absolute best way, and I've never had anyone disagree with this. So, now you're in front of the client. What do? What are you going to do?
Talk, communicate.
All right, and what are you doing? You're talking, you're communicating, but what are you trying to get?
Finding out about them.
Yes, and how do you do that?
Asking questions.
Ask questions. Number 2, you've got to ask questions. Now, that's all over the board in our industry. You call it whatever you want. A fact find, a profile, whatever you want to call it, that's fine. You've got to ask questions. You've got to find out where they were, where they are, where they want to go. Now, I don't mean to minimize this, and I don't mean to waste your time. Number 3 is pretty basic. You're going to think you got to be kidding me, Robin. But you'd be surprised. What's number 3?
Listen.
Yes, you nailed it. Most people don't get that. They're already into number 4, number 5, number 6. Think about this. You got to listen. You ask questions, you better listen to their answers. All right? Now, let me give you an example. How many of you have asked somebody what their name is because you're meeting them for the first time? And you ask them their name, you extend your hand, and less than 2 minutes later, you're walking back thinking,
You forgot their name.
what's their name? Because you're already thinking about what you were going to say next, and you never remembered it. Okay? And it's the same thing with looking at your watch. You could look at it and say, hey, look at your watch. I didn't say look at the time. I said look at the watch. You look at your watch, you put it back down, and 10 minutes later, I could say, oh, by the way, what time it is, and you couldn't remember. Because you weren't looking at the time, you're looking at the watch. So, Diane, you nailed it. How important is listening? And now you begin to see how this flows. You're face-to-face with the client. You're asking them lots of questions. You're listening to their answers. Now, Tara, is it possible? Is it possible that you ask me a question and I give an answer and all of you in this room hear something different? Is that possible?
It is.
Sure it is. Because we process it through our own filters. So number 4 is extremely important. I believe a couple of these rise to a higher level, and I think number 4 is one of those, and I'm actually going to circle it in red. Because I believe if you do not do number 4, you can't get the suitability. You know, by the way, if you get the suitability without doing number 4, you got lucky. You've got to verify for accuracy. You've got to verify for accuracy that what you heard or what I said is what you heard. And how do you do that? You ask the same question a little differently. I don't know how you ask the same question differently, but I think you all know what I'm talking about. You phrase it just a little bit differently in hopes that you get what?
Verification.
The same answer. Absolutely. Now, Tara, let me ask you this. Is it possible when you repeat what I said, I say back to you, I know that's what I said, but that's not what I meant? Is that possible?
Yes.
Yes! So number 4, you got to verify for accuracy and you got to clarify for meaning. Think about this for a second. If you don't do number 4, how do you get to number 9? Could you imagine if you simply met met with me, asked me all these questions, and you heard the answers, and you went to number 5, which we're going to get to in a minute. Okay? And you didn't do this. And what you heard was put you in this direction. But what I said, I was over here. You can't get to number 9. Imagine if what I meant was over here, but I really said this. You can't get to number 9. And this, I believe, is where a lot of advisors miss. They do this, they do this, they do this, they go right to number 5, and they don't make sure we're on the same page, looking in the same direction. Very, very important. What's number 5? I'll lead you a little bit. A short pencil is better than a long memory.
Write it down.
Document.
Yes. Say it again, John.
Document.
Didn't hear it. Say it one more time.
Document.
Document, document, document. Ladies and gentlemen, document, document, and document. And now watch this. Certainly all my securities reps will understand exactly the direction I'm going on this. Be careful with your documentation, because you never know whose else's eyes are going to see it. Do you want to hear a story? Can't hear you. You want to hear a story? Yes or no?
Yes.
All right. So my wife, in the business since 1982. She's a real pro. Some of you have met Kathy. I will tell you, she works almost exclusively with physicians. She has a client. The client has a partner doctor and a pediatrician, as I understand it. And picture this again. Client, partner of her client, another pediatrician. Okay? Has 3 kids in a family, and in a file does a procedure on one of the children, messes up, goes to court. Obviously, a plaintiff attorney has access to those files. Plaintiff attorney has the doctor on the stand and says, I'm curious, by this particular child you have UK. What does that mean? And you might guess, and I'll give you a hint, it's not United Kingdom. Unknown. It's a logical, absolute logical thing. Unknown, we're talking the medical profession, you put a UK over by a child's name, it's unknown. But he took an oath, and he took an oath to a higher authority that he'd tell the truth and nothing but the truth. UK stood for ugly kid.
Jeez. Oh.
Imagine a jury trial. Imagine the parents in that room. The pediatrician messed up. Clearly an accident, wasn't intentional. I don't know any doctor who goes into an operating room saying, I'm going to do an intentional and lop off the wrong ankle. Well, that's happened before. I don't believe it was an intentional. It's accidental. So I'm assuming that in this case it was simply an accident. But the way he chose to remember this child that he messed up on was ugly kid. Be careful what you document, because you never know whose else's eyes are going to see it. And there are many more stories. I'm simply sharing one with you. So now you see how this begins to flow. We're halfway to suitability. What's very interesting is while maybe this is the first time you're being exposed to this in this step process to get there, you really knew every one of these, didn't you? I'm just thinking them up. You knew that the best way was in person or face-to-face, and you knew why, to pick up all the nonverbals. You know that the next thing you do is you got to find out about them, so you're going to ask questions, lots of questions, finding out where they're at, where they want to go, okay, where they've been. You want to hear those answers, all right? Clearly, number 4, you want to verify for accuracy and clarify for meaning. Remember, the intent of number 4 is to make sure you're on the same page, that you're looking in the same direction. And then you want to carefully document, and we know why. So what's number 6? Now you have all this information in front of you. What are you going to do?
Time to start planning.
You're close. You're close. What do you have to do with all the information, Andy?
Assess it.
Yes, got to analyze. You got to begin to analyze all of this. All right? So you've got all this information, and now you want to begin to assess or analyze all this information that you have in front of you. Good. Now, I'm told that You're supposed to look at the end result of the current course of action before you make any or propose any changes. I'm going to repeat what I just said. That we should be looking at the end result of the current course of action before you make any changes. Remember what we're talking about here now. Suitability. If the direction they want to go is here, and you've looked at the end result of their current course of action, and you're still going here, why might you make any changes?
Forgot something.
Okay? And that's possible. There still may be some tweaks, but maybe not an all-out change. However, Diane, do people's needs change?
Right.
Sure. So where they were going at one time, that's not where they want to go anymore. They want to go over here. So we study the end result of the current course of action, which leads us here, but they want to be here. And in this analysis, that's what you begin to uncover. Now, is it possible, Tara, is it possible that just maybe when you do this thorough analysis, you uncover needs, plural? All right, I hope you all get that down. Notice what I said, needs. And I'm using the plural. Okay? Is it possible, Tara, that you uncover needs, but they only have a budget for one?
Yes.
Okay, so what, John, should they then do for step number 7?
Prioritize.
Absolutely. Did you all get that? You've got to prioritize. Now, if they don't have needs, plural, you go straight from 6 to 8, which I'll give you in a second. But if they have needs, plural, and a budget for one, you've got to prioritize. You've got to prioritize those needs. All right? Now, step number 8 then, finally, you come up with solutions, options, and recommendations, which takes us, if you will, to step number 9, which is suitability. And some would argue, well, Robin, once you've done your solutions and maybe you proposed options and recommendations, you hit suitability. I agree. They interchange. There maybe isn't a great difference between number 8 to number 9. All right? The goal is number 9, suitability. After you document, you assess, you analyze all this information. If you come up with needs and they only have a budget for one, you prioritize those needs. If they don't have needs and they only have a need, you go right to step number 8. Obviously, after you prioritize, you hit step number 8. Now you're putting your solutions together. Remember the definition of suitability. One word, matching. What are we matching? Solution to what? Need. For who? The person. When? At the time. Brings us full circle. Now we found our suitability. Today. Questions on this? Does it make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Now we have 6 more steps. Step 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. Okay? Now, what's possible, and hopefully it's the goal, is number 10. They buy. So I simply ink that with a W and a W and a W. Win, win, win. Well, how cool is this? The client gets a solution that's suitable for them. Win. You get paid for your efforts. Win. Company gets the business. Win. That's how it's supposed to work. But sometimes they don't buy. So what should you do? What's step number 11? And by the way, what do you believe the lead reason is why they don't buy?
The real reason or the reason they say?
The real reason.
Too expensive.
Pardon me?
Too expensive.
Okay. Cost? I would submit, if we've done our suitability, this shouldn't be a reason. Do you understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. If we've really done our suitability and found something that matches their needs for them today, this shouldn't be an issue. However, it comes up.
It's what they say, but then it just means you didn't communicate the value or the wisdom of the solution.
Which means they don't.
They don't see the value.
They don't.
If they don't see the value, they don't. They don't act. They don't buy. Let me ask you this.
Maybe they don't trust you.
Well, that's one I can't close, and I'm going to get that one up there as well. Okay, trust or dislike. And we'll talk about those in a second. I agree with you. If they don't see the value, they're probably not going to buy. Okay? But is it possible they don't understand?
Yes.
Can't hear you.
Yes.
The lead reason why most people don't buy is they don't understand. They may not say that,
No, they'll say cost all the time.
but that becomes the lead reason. They don't perceive the value. They don't perceive it because they don't understand it. And if they don't understand it, who is that on? We're face to face now.
You.
Correct. So, what do we do? If they don't understand it, what do we have to do?
Explain.
Explain it.
Go back and do what?
Explain again, start over.
Go back. Re-explain. What else what might we have to do?
Reiterate the importance.
Correct. Reiterate the importance. What else? Might we have to ask more questions?
Reevaluate, possibly.
Okay? Re-explain. Reiterate the importance. Okay? What did you say, Andy? Reevaluate?
Possibly reevaluate.
Okay?
Didn't get it accurate enough.
And you ask more questions. Now, trust and dislike. Fascinating. Want to hear a story?
Yes.
Yes.
So, I'm in my business with a young man in the business, 3 years into the business, and I get referred into this one fellow's home and I'm doing my fact find, him and his wife, and I just sensed something. I just sensed the wall. And after about 20 minutes, I frankly, I don't remember the man's name. I just said, I just sense there's something here. And he goes, well, there is. And I said, and that is? He goes, I don't like you. You know what? He saved me hours. Instead of going through the whole process and coming back and putting my recommendations together, okay, of which he wasn't going to do anything with me anyways because he didn't like me, saved a lot of time. And as soon as he said he didn't like me, I closed my folder, we stood up, shook hands, and I still remember it was a summer night in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I walked outside and I just looked up at the sky and I saw those stars and I just said, well, thanks. I don't like you. And guess what? To this day, I still don't know how to close don't like or don't trust. And I have a suggestion from what I've heard from individuals around the country, and this is what they brought up, and I think it's a great suggestion. They said, if ever that becomes an issue, that you do believe, well, let me ask this question. Do any of you in this room think if a potential client doesn't trust you or they don't like you, do you think they're ever going to buy from you?
No.
Of course not.
No.
And so the suggestion was, maybe you do some joint work. I agree. Or maybe you've introduced it or opened it up, now you back away and you bring someone else in. And that's very, very possible. And that came from doing one of these sessions around America, and I thought it was a very, very positive way to address that one there. So, remember where we're at. Number 9 was suitability. We come into number 10. Hopefully they buy. Everybody wins. But if they don't, why don't they? Okay, what's the real underlying reason? What might they give you? And those two might be different. If they don't understand, we got to go back and ask more questions. What is it you don't understand? And then from there you move. Now, number 12. This is very important. I'm going to put it so important, I'm going to put it in red. You have to have a disclaimer today. I've seen company fact finds right now that actually have this on there. It's an automatic. You can't miss it. You go through the fact find. They choose not to take your recommendations. They actually sign off on it. Ladies and gentlemen, number 5 will protect you if you're in arbitration. If you don't have it, it's your word against theirs. Guess who loses?
You.
Most of the time, the agent will lose. It's your word against theirs. Most of the time, it ends right there in arbitration if you have great documentation. However, it proceeds further. And what we're finding now, in some states and in some lines, that you have to have a disclaimer that proves you asked them to buy. You have to prove that you asked them to buy. What line? What line might you think that some of the lawsuits are coming in on now? Anybody? It's long-term care. Guess who's suing who? It's the agent getting sued, but guess who's bringing the suit? The adults or the children? Children. Children are bringing the suit because the very reason why the parents didn't buy is the kids were going to take care of them. And then the kids are either unable or unwilling. And they're two different things. Unable might mean they're in a different state. Just can't do it. Unwilling just means they're not going to do it. And now the inheritance is going away. And now they bring the suit to the agent, simply saying what? You never asked my mom or dad to buy. We see the proposals. Prove you asked them to buy. 4 things on a disclaimer you should have. This is for your protection. Ever goes to court, you got this. This protects you in court. 2 of the 4 are very easy. Name. That's easy. You already know the name. Date. That's easy. You already know the date. Reason is number 3. The reason they gave you for not buying. And wouldn't it be cool to be in court and your defense attorney has the document and the reason why. And the reason why the parents didn't buy is because the parents said the kids are going to take care of me. That's what they told me. And it's the kids bringing the suit. And number 4. Well, anybody could have wrote that in. You bet. You have their signature. Some people won't sign, you get their initials. Some people won't initial it, make a note and put it in your file. I'm going to give you a way that might be a little easier to get that signature. Some still won't sign it. I'm aware, and believe me, I am aware that there are agents that are listening to this that will use this as a sales tool. That there are some clients who would rather sign the application, the solution, than a disclaimer. And there are some agents that are that good they can position it that way. This is an ethics class. That's not how I'm positioning. I'm positioning this for your protection. You have the name, the date, the reason. You need their signature. If they're not going to sign it, you get the initials. If they're not going to initial it, get a note, put it in your file. That on August 12th at 11:40 a.m. Eastern Time, so-and-so chose not to sign, and in the file it goes. We'll talk about consistency, Andy, soon. But this is very, very interesting. All right? Here's how you get around this. We'll role play. John, would you agree with me that we spent quite a bit of time in the last week or two getting some facts from you, gathering, putting some things together, some solutions that are suitable for you and your family to protect your family at this time? Would you agree with that?
Yes.
You bet. I respect your decision not to purchase today. But now I need to protect myself. And I need you simply to authorize this disclaimer, which proves that I've asked you to purchase this. And you hand them a pen. Most people get it. They realize you've spent some time finding solutions that are appropriate for them today. But they don't want to buy. Fine. You've got to respect that decision. But you still have to protect yourself. And they understand that. Signature, initial note in the file that goes, that's number 12. Number 13, very quickly. Follow up. You got to follow up. I'm just going to abbreviate. F, follow, arrow going up. Follow up. You got to follow up. Now, that's all relative for those of you listening to this. Some might follow up in 24 hours. Others, 72. Others a week. Others a month. Okay? So that's all relative, but I think that becomes a very, very, very important piece. In number 14, consistency. Consistency of process. Andy, would you agree that that's pretty important?
Yes.
You bet it is. Consistency of process. I've had many people come up at this moment and say, Robin, if I start doing this today, how do I get all these people that are my clients? I said, well, do you do periodic reviews, like semi-annual reviews? The answer to that is yes. Well, in any court of law, if you can set the bar today, August 12, 2014, and you start to do this method of suitability, then when you begin to do the reviews, now you bring them over to this side. It's the consistency of process that they look for. If anyone ever has had their books audited, you know they'll take them randomly at first. They'll start at the A's, maybe grab a D, a J, or an N. And they're looking for consistency of process. If they see it, they might leave you alone. If they don't, they start going through all of them. And if you've had your books audited, you know what I'm talking about. Consistency of process, extremely important. And let me give you step number 15. Ongoing service. Ongoing service. So we're going to run through this one last time just to make sure we're all on the same page with this. All right? We look at suitability, remember, and that is the end result, and that's the goal. All right? We know that if we're defining it, if we really believe passion without suitability could be dangerous, then we have to define it. And how do we define it? One word, matching. Well, what are we matching? Solution to need for the person at the time. So, we meet face to face. Why? Because you pick up the nonverbals, the absolute best way. Never had anyone disagree with that, by the way. You ask questions, lots of them, fact find, whatever you call it. You hear their answers. Number 4, extremely important. You verify for accuracy and clarify for meaning to make sure you're on the same page. You carefully document. Remember, you never know whose eyes are going to see that. You analyze, studying the end result of their current course of action before you make changes. If you uncover needs, plural, you've got to prioritize those needs, especially if they only have a budget for one. And then you come to solutions, options, and recommendations which are suitable for the client. At this point, assuming they like you and trust you, they buy. Everybody's happy now. Okay? If not, you got to ask more questions. Why is it they're not buying? What is it they don't understand? You drill down to get the real answers. If they still don't buy, you got to protect yourself. That's in red right here, and that's the disclaimer. You already know their name, you know the date, get the reason why, and then obviously get the signature. If they won't sign it, get them an initial. If they won't initial it, make a note, put it in your file. Make sure you follow up with them. Because you believe people's needs change, so do I. What might not be right for them today might be right for them in 6 months. Consistency of process is very important. Remember, we're talking ethics here. And suitability is a huge piece of ethics. We could have lumped this in as a 4th foundation of good ethics. I believe it's so important it's a standalone. And we spend more time on it than we do laws and rules and guidelines. And more time on it than full disclosure. And more time on best interests of the client, considering all parties. Consistency, extremely important. I heard Andy say earlier, predictability. I think everyone in this room would want that. I think you'd want that from a spouse. Consistency. I think you'd want that from a financial advisor. That you know they're going to be there. Okay? That you can count on them when you need to count on them. And ongoing service. Any questions on suitability?
Good.
All right. Let's move into what I define as the imperfect storm. What we've defined here are seniors. We've talked about it in the opening remarks. We've talked about it again at the beginning of the session. The imperfect storm. And we know that the demographic that gets taken advantage of the most are seniors. Now, I'm going to take this a step forward. Would you agree with me that today's 65-year-old is a better educated 65-year-old than the generation prior? Yes or no?
Yes.
Absolutely. So I'm really defining seniors out there now in their 80s and 90s, of which my mom is one, and I'm going to share an example about what happened to my mom. So seniors, and then there's something also called vulnerable adults. And I won't spend a lot of time on this one, but it gives you an opportunity to really develop this in your session. All right, what is a vulnerable adult? Let me give you a couple areas. It might be someone who's developmentally challenged. Okay? It might be someone who has a learning disability. It might be someone who's ignorant in a subject. And ignorant isn't a bad word. Ignorant simply means you're uninformed. So, and truth be told, and Diane will have fun with this, and so will Tara, and so will John and Andy, because you've all worked with me before. You know, I still use an overhead projector. And when they really get me technical, we jump up to an Elmo instead of all this PowerPoint stuff. And all it is it's a style thing. But most places don't have overhead projectors anymore. So guess what I did? I went out and bought 3 of them, and I went to Office Max and bought every bulb they have. If they last to their life expectancy, I'm dead before they burn out. So there you have it. All right? So some would say I'm a vulnerable adult when it comes to all this new technology that's out there. Okay? And someone could pull the wool over my eyes, if you will, on some stuff if I'm buying certain things, because I don't know enough about it. Now, truth be told, I'd like to think I'd study a little bit before, so I wouldn't be vulnerable. But that's what I'm trying to give you some examples of what a real vulnerable adult is. And it would be someone with a learning disability. It would be someone who's developmentally challenged. And it certainly could be someone who's ignorant about a subject, which doesn't mean they're stupid. It just means they're uninformed. Okay? But I want to now focus really on this imperfect storm as it relates to seniors. And I'm going to ask for a little participation here, and we'll see how fast we can get that. There are a lot of reasons why seniors are taken advantage of, but we'll see if we can get this really in the first 2 adjectives. Okay? There are many, but What's one thing that when you think seniors, 80s and 90s, that they do? What's synonymous with the senior in their 80s and 90s? Some would say they're lonely. I get it. Some would say they're confused, which now you could almost slide them over into the vulnerable adult if they have an onset of dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that. But what do some seniors? My mom, oh my, she's going to be 86 this year. Let me ask you this. Do you think a lot of those seniors, now there's exceptions to everything, but a lot of them are trusting?
Yes.
Sure they are.
Generational.
And I'm aware that some in this group came through the Great Depression and maybe they're not as trusting, some of them, okay? But I will tell you, there is a large group of seniors in 80s and 90s that are just very trusting. And you could say, well, maybe they're that because they're lonely, okay? Maybe they're that because they're confused, but they are very, very trusting people for the most part. And again, there's exceptions to this, all right? Do some of these seniors, some of them, do they have money? Can't hear you.
Yes.
Sure they do. Watch this. You now have your imperfect storm starting to brew. You've got seniors that trust with money, and now you have this coming in the door. An unethical agent. Unethical agent with a senior that trusts with money. Got your imperfect storm. Absolute disaster ready to happen. Because they don't care. Picture the scenario. This could be anybody. We're just talking about seniors because they do get taken advantage of the most. So you got someone who's up in years and maybe they're lonely. They just want company. Okay? But they're trusting. My mom. Story about that in a minute. Money. Doesn't care. Recipe for disaster. We owe it to this demographic to make sure we're taking care of them. And I'm going to give you 3 areas to focus on. Okay? There are more. We could spend an hour on this. We're not. We could. So let me give you 3 areas. First one, hard of hearing. Those individuals that are hard of hearing. Now normally I'll have someone in the audience say, what? All right? I want you to think about this for a second. And I'll bet you all know someone who's hard of hearing. You may not even know it. They just have too much pride. So what are they going to do? They're going to nod their head and they're going to smile at you. And you won't even know. And yet they may be missing every other word that you're saying. And those are important words that they're missing. And here's the key. You can't let their children know. Because you just breached privacy. Their own children may not know they're hard of hearing. Their own children may not know they have an onset of dementia. By the way, on that subject, and I'll stare straight into the camera on this one, if you believe that your client has an onset of dementia or Alzheimer's, look out. Be very careful. And back away and get some other people in that interview with you. I am aware of companies that will actually, on existing clients, bring in corporate security with the agent. So there's another set of eyes and ears on there to make sure. Okay? Very, very important. And there have been some cases recently in some other states which will remain unnamed in this session that have happened. And while some of those cases have been thrown out, made the agent's lives pretty miserable for a while. All right, so there are ways around this at this point in time. When you think someone has hard of hearing, when you think someone may have an onset of Alzheimer's or dementia, and that's the one you really want to be careful with, is there anyone else that you would want in on this interview? So it's a great proactive way. They may know they're hard of hearing. Their children may not. They don't want to breach or handle a subject with their client, their children, but maybe that's a good way for them to get into, for you to ask, is there anyone else you'd want in on this interview? Is there anyone else that helps you make financial decisions? So there's a couple ways of being proactive on it as a way to maybe help out. But I will tell you, that's one that you may never know. They're prideful people. They're hard of hearing. They're hearing every other word you're saying and simply smiling at you and nodding their head. So be mindful of that. Give them an extra touch. You know why? Because an unethical agent isn't. Number 2, area of focus on. Some seniors just can't say no. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes.
My mom's one of them. She can't say no. She'll have a best friend when someone calls her on the phone and wants to stop by. All of a sudden, it's her best friend. So I am going to share one story with you, and I'm not embarrassed to share this about my mom, but I will tell you it was Easter of 2010. Mom lives in Scottsdale, Arizona. And it was Easter of 2010. I remember she wanted me to drop her off at the bank. She was going to withdraw a couple $100 just for some spending cash. And I remember I said, hey, Mom, do me a favor. On the way out, get that little statement they give you, that little receipt, if you will, and have them write your balance on. I just want to see how you're doing. You see, I knew exactly how much money she had coming in, and I knew exactly how much she had going out. Just wanted to see how she was doing. And I'll never forget, she comes out and she shows me the balance. I tapped her on the leg and I said, Mom, way to go. I said, you're going to be just fine. Easter 2010. 6 weeks later, Memorial Day 2010, all the money was gone. All of it. And to this day, I still don't know who or what came into her life, but it all went away. All of it. I'm not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Tens of thousands, yes, not hundreds. I call the bank. Now, I'm back in Wisconsin, and I'm calling the bank from a couple thousand miles away, and I said, you didn't have any red flag on this? Nope. And by the way, the bank will remain unnamed. And I said, well, this is interesting. I said, I can tell you the 6 checks that my mom writes every month, and she's been doing it for the last 25 years on your bank. I can tell you those 6. The numbers change a little bit based on the utility or the phone service or the rent or what, or. But I can tell you the 6. I said, you had no red flag on this. Nope. Interesting. I need you to fax me. And, of course, based on my vulnerable adultness of, I didn't say email, I said fax me, okay, the last month's activity. The manager I was talking to had the assistant manager working on it. We had been on the phone 3 minutes. He said, how much paper do you have in your fax machine? I said, why do you ask? He said, we have 81 pages so far. So Mom went in 25 years, 2.5 decades, to writing 6 checks on a bank every month to 81 pages of entries. It appears as though most of the money went to charity. Good for Mom. She's got a good heart. I wish I was named as one of the charities. Okay? All the money's gone. Went away. So we had to restructure some things in that. Okay? Here's my point. By the way, if anyone needs a 2011 calendar, I have many of them left. And I think you all know, and I appreciate the audience here smiling. I think you know that once you're on a list, you're on a list. And once you contribute, you get on other lists. Some of you know what I'm talking about, and I think you all know that little shiny penny that you get in the mail. And you got some labels for the holidays, Christmas labels and things like that. And so Mom thinks that shiny penny's worth $25. And you know what they send the next time? A nickel. Now that's $50. Then they send $1. That's $100. You see how fast this can go. My point is this. Every one of you listening to this has clients that can't say no. You know who they are. Imagine them here, trusting with money, and a person who doesn't care. Give them an extra touch. The third area, and while there are more, I'm only giving 3. Hard of hearing, those that can't say no. First-time decision makers. First-time decision makers. John, how long have you been married?
25 years.
25 years. Tara, months for you, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, how cool is that? Congratulations. Andy, how long have you been married?
Not.
Okay. Diane, 36 years. Anniversary today, correct?
Yes.
How cool is that? Normally what I'll do in the audience is ask for those of you that have been married more than 40 years and or 50 years, and I'll have a good feel into this time frame now about my audience and the tenure and the age and the maturity of them, if you will. Oftentimes I'll get someone in there saying, well, yeah, I've been married 60 years, but not to the same person. Well, that's not what I'm looking for here. I'm looking for a 40, a 45, a 50-year person that's been married to the same person. So, Diane, I'll ask 36 years to the same man?
Yes.
Very good. Okay, who makes the financial decisions in your family?
It's joint.
It is joint. Everything's joint? Everything's equal?
Yes.
Okay. No one takes the major decisions and makes them?
No, not big ones.
In a lot of households, and thank you, in a lot of households, you'll find, especially out here, couples that have been married 50 and 60 years, and one of the two people make the decisions. One of the two. Maybe it's the male, maybe it's the female. One quick story. Recently I did one of these sessions, and I had a woman that was sitting next to me. She was a banker, and she was sitting next to me on my right-hand side. And she said, I'd like to speak to this. I said, you bet. She goes, I had an 85-year-old man come into my branch yesterday in tears. He had been married for 62 years, and his wife died. And his wife made all the economic decisions. He didn't even know how to write a check. Now, that's not a negative. That's just how it is for some of them. Think about this. Fits this profile. The assumptive is this Female banker's trusting. He can trust her, right? She's ethical. That's the assumptive. But he had been working with her for decades. So he's trusting, has money. She said he dropped everything on my desk with tears in his eyes. I don't know what to do. Imagine had this person got in there first. Imperfect storm. We're talking ethics. We're talking how important it is. You've got seniors in their 80s and 90s that trust with money. Got to keep them out. And I gave you 3 areas to focus on. Hard of hearing, those that can't say no, and first-time decision makers. Any questions on this? Okay. Let's talk about a couple other talking points. The first one I want to begin with is fiduciary, and this is all over the board. Fiduciary. I'm beginning to develop a 17th hour of ethics by bringing this one in as an hour, to spend an hour of time on it. We won't do that today. But it's interesting to note that the United States Supreme Court recently said they believe a fiduciary is poorly defined. I want to repeat what I just said. The United States Supreme Court, the highest court in our land, has recently said we believe the word fiduciary is poorly defined. And it's interesting. I'll give you a couple generic definitions of it, a couple adjectives, but before I do that, let's just solicit the audience here a little bit. When you see the word fiduciary, you hear the word fiduciary, what might be the first word that comes to mind? And John, I'll start with you.
Responsibility.
Responsibility. Tara? And you can pass if you want.
I'd probably think responsibility too.
All right. Okay, fair enough. Diane?
In addition to responsibility, informed.
Informed. Andy?
Yeah, I was going to say responsibility also, but yeah, educated.
Okay.
Responsibility.
Well, let's talk about that now. Andy, let's elaborate a little bit. Educated?
Informed can be kind of word of mouth. Educated is that you went out and researched it yourself.
Okay, so educated and informed, not about life in general, Andy, correct? But rather about the subject matter that you want them to talk to you about, correct?
Yes.
You don't care, I'm assuming, Andy, you don't care if your advisor knows a lot about football if you don't care about football. Is that a correct statement?
Sure.
So the point here then is informed or educated in that particular subject matter. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. In a generic statement, a fiduciary is a person held to a higher trust. It's a person held to a higher trust, a higher standard, a higher regard. I talk with a lot of attorneys, and attorneys' definition they would say the burden of loyalty is to the other. That's interesting, because I've never known loyalty to be a burden. But if you understand attorney speak, that's it. The burden of loyalty is to the other. What's a fiduciary? Well, the burden of loyalty is to the other. Okay? It's a person held to a higher standard, a higher trust, a higher regard. United States Supreme Court says fiduciary is poorly defined. So as I've traveled the country, I've asked every audience when I start out an ethics session, what do you believe a fiduciary to be? And there are many occupations. We talked about one earlier. Could a funeral director take advantage of an individual at the moment of truth? And you responded, how so? Absolutely. Sure they could. So there's a time when a funeral director operates in a fiduciary capacity. Some would say law enforcement. Okay, that when you're pulled over by law enforcement, that they should be acting in a higher regard, that you can trust them to not take advantage of that situation. Okay? Clergy, educators, financial advisors, accountants, attorneys. That list could go on. And truth be told, while I have a personal opinion about financial advisors, those securities reps, acting in fiduciary capacity, at last study, I'm told FINRA doesn't want them to say they do act as a fiduciary. You have to have a special license, as I understand, to do that. So it's very, very interesting. So there is some confusion about this word. But let me just suggest to you the four things, the four adjectives that come up over and over and over again. In no particular order, on behalf of. In other words, what I'm sharing with you now is from around America. I have asked every audience in the last several years what they believe a fiduciary is. And these are the 4 things that have come up the most on behalf of honest, trust, and no surprise here, 3 of the 4 of you said responsibility. And of the 4, the 2 that come up the most are trust and responsibility. Interesting. Professional. And right now we're into talking points. Okay? So we want to offer up the word professional. And it might be a great opportunity at this time for the facilitator to offer up, go around the room what they think professional is. As I've done it, let me give you the 11 adjectives that come up from around America when they hear the word professional. Here they are. These are the ones that have come up over and over and over and over again. And, I might add, in alphabetical order. These are. Here we go. Appearance. Now, for those of you making notes, I want you to think about every one of these that you write down. And think professional, then think that word, appearance. Okay? Number 2, articulate. Number 3, committed. Number 4, consistent. Number 5, empathy. So the first 5, appearance, articulate, committed, consistent, empathy. While there may be others, and there will be at least 6 more I'm going to share with you, would any of you disagree with any of those first 5?
No.
When you think professional?
I mean, appearance is funny to me in some ways.
Not necessarily.
I understand a professional appearance, but that's a side thing. I don't think it's at the core of being a professional.
Let me ask you this, John. Would you do business with a financial advisor that didn't look the part of a financial advisor?
Someone in running shorts.
No, I understand, but I think people.
Well, that'd be a yes or no answer.
People, what looks like a financial advisor to one person might not to someone else.
That's what I was looking for, because it begs the next question: what does a financial advisor look for or look like? Okay, and you can have a lot of top financial advisors jogging around in jogging shorts and tennis shoes, okay? But it might not strike you as a first impression of somebody that might know what they're talking about. Is that a fair assessment?
I've recently been in central Wisconsin and compare that to New York City.
Yes.
And what the appearance of a professional is going to be different.
Yeah, that is a great scenario of, hi, Julie. That is an absolute, and that's why when we were talking prior, how cool and how different it is for both you and Andy, to see that dichotomy. Absolutely. Very good. So it goes back almost to what we talked about under ethics with norms. Mm-hmm. Norms. And the way you said that, and depending upon race and cultures and religion and things like that. Very, very interesting. Geographical areas of the country. Very good.
But I think it can vary so much, it seems to me.
Oh, you could have a lot of fun with that one with appearance. Okay? And there is an underlying story behind this particular individual who brought it up, but then it kept showing up in all pockets of the country, which was fascinating. That's why I brought it to the table. 6 others. Thank you, John. Ethical. Interesting. Now, what would be cool is you have a room of 20 or 30 people and you put up the word professional and you do it very quickly and say, you see the word, give me one adjective, and you go right around that room. As soon as you hear ethical, you can stop. It's an ethics class. But you'd be surprised that sometimes it doesn't even come up until the very end. It's not the first thing people think of when they hear or see the word professional. They don't think ethical right away, which is now open for debate. Based on our first R, we defined it, but some might not agree with that definition. So, ethical is number 6, honest number 7, knowledgeable number 8. And again, the assumptive is knowledgeable in what? The subject matter. Not in every subject possible, all right, but knowledgeable in a subject matter. Ethical 6, honesty 7, knowledgeable 8. Organized, number 9. Punctual, number 10. Responsible, number 11. So now you begin to see a common thread, don't you? Fiduciary, honest, responsible, professional. While there were 11 adjectives. Honest, responsible. Another talking point, social responsibility. I'm not going to ink it up there, but I do want to speak to it. Another word by social responsibility you might want to add is image. It's not who you see, it's who sees you. It's not who you see, it's who sees you. And my wife reminds me about this every December and January at Lambeau Field when I take my shirt off. And the fact that you're laughing tells me you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, I want to be clear. I've never taken my shirt off at Lambeau Field. But the fact that you're laughing tells me you've all seen it somewhere on TV. Okay? It's not who you see, it's who sees you. And a lot of you watching this session right now are in these tiny communities. Very small communities. People talk. They know who you are. What's your image in that community? Do you go out? I'm aware that there are some individuals that will drive a couple counties to go out and have drinks because they don't want to be seen in their backyard drinking. And maybe having a drink or two too many and taking the keys and getting in a car knowing clients have seen them. Interesting. Social responsibility. Your image in the community. What is your role in the community? As we begin to close this session out, let me just give you a couple other thoughts. The word expert. What a wonderful opportunity to begin to play on that word, where we talk fiduciary, professional, talk social responsibility, and now we move it into expert. Okay? Some would say it's a person that has a higher level of understanding with the ability to communicate. That's interesting. Okay? A higher level of understanding, so they become an expert in that material, yet they have the ability to be able to communicate it. Okay? That's what some would say an expert is. It may be other things. I'm just offering it up. I might offer to you to develop a lot of role play in is what age? What age does someone know the difference between good ethics and bad ethics? Not right from wrong, but good ethics and bad ethics. And as I've posed that question, my experience has been from as little as an infant crawling on her hands and knees and being said no to when you walk over to an outlet, to someone saying your entire life, because it's a continuum. Ethics is a continuum. We're continually learning. But it gives you an opportunity to develop this in a session. What age? I might also submit to you that to build into a second hour of an ethics class would be your state laws. Know your state laws. What we're doing here is going perhaps to every state, but yet every state, while some consistency, has some differing laws. And to be able to bring that concept into an ethics class, I actually develop a general law test, which every agent should know 40 questions if you're going to have a license in the state of Wisconsin. And that's part of another ethics class I do. Obviously, because this is going to multiple states, we're not doing that here, but for you to be able to know the basic laws of your state and then commit that to a quiz or a test would be absolutely fascinating. Again, to get some role play interaction dialogue. By the way, most people don't pass the test. They're licensed agents. Most people don't pass the test when they do it individually. When I put them in small groups, they do a little bit better. After I get finished with it, everyone has 100%. Okay? So there's lots of opportunity, a lot of opportunity to develop this second hour, especially under those talking points. And to wrap up the second hour then, what we've really defined is we spent a lot of time on suitability. That's so important. Again, that could be a pillar of what good ethics is, but so important I wanted to have it stand alone. We talk and spend some good amount of time as well on what we call the imperfect storm. Senior demographics certainly being taken advantage of, and also vulnerable adults, some areas to focus on there, and then some other talking points, the words, if you will, fiduciary, professional, social responsibility, and some other direction for you to go in. As well as you could bring in other case studies actually into the beginning of this to get it going. So as we begin to wrap up the second hour, know that the third hour will be all case studies. Thank you.
Thank you for participating in this program. For more information regarding products, programs, services, and other NAIFA member benefits, visit www.naifa.org.